Welcome to the Product Signal, everybody. We're going to talk about products and product management today. I'm Brad Eiben, the Executive Director of the MS in Product Management program at Carnegie Mellon University. And I'm joined today, we're lucky, I'm joined by one of the smartest guys I know. Dave, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Dave. I work as a healthcare investor based out of Pittsburgh at UPMC Enterprises.
Dave, we're going to talk about product management, the basics today. And the funny thing about products is sometimes they can be a little frustrating. Tell me your most recent story.
So last week, I was at the airport, classic early morning flight, sleepy-eyed travelers everywhere. There were multiple kiosks, 2 agents, and about 30 people staring blankly at confusing signage. And instead of stressing about catching the flight, figuring out the gate, or how long will it take me to reach, and what do I have to do, I was actually doing a live usability audit, trying to map out the user journey, understanding the interaction point, understanding the trap of friction. Couldn't understand why all the international travelers were traveling in the same line as domestic one, and why couldn't it be improved. And that's when I realized, and maybe it hit me, is the curse of product manager or being trained in product management? Or is it just me, Brad?
And let's call it a blessing. The point is you see these products and you see opportunities for improvement everywhere. And once you've been in this world, once you've been in this field, you can't really turn it off. My story is also recent, and it's actually on my wrist right now. This is a Whoop. It's a health device, health tracking device, similar in many ways to an Apple Watch or an Aura Ring. I'm a new user, and it's great at doing what it does well, but it has so many opportunities for improvement. So it tracks heart rate and different metrics pretty nicely, which is why I have it. It doesn't give the clutter that an Apple Watch will give, or there's a lot of reasons why I chose it over the watch. But what it doesn't do is a lot of the things my other fitness apps do for me. So in any given trip to the gym, I need to use like 5 different apps, one to track food, one to track the actual exercises, because they added a feature to track the exercises, but it's really poor and clumsy. So I sit there using it, thinking about all the opportunities for it to be integrated into the way that I use it, because I use it in a way that's pretty common for Whoop customers, but it lacks integration with other apps. This is what we mean by mindset. And once you see these opportunities, you see them everywhere. You can't not see them.
Absolutely, Brad. And just to be clear to our listeners, we're not talking about how, we find flaws in a product. We are trying to understand that we use that product, we love, but it's that mindset where you're constantly trying to improve, understand several aspects, tying it back to strategy and business, what makes the most sense. So that's a great segue as we create the first episode of our series specifically focused on aspiring and young PMs.
Yeah, and today we're basically going to cover what is a product, and that might sound obvious. That might sound like a no-brainer, but confusion exists on this topic, and it's oftentimes aspiring PMs especially consider products to be apps, software, the things that I use every day on my phone, Google, Meta, and not really what the full spectrum of products. And especially for a young product manager, there are so many opportunities available if you understand how to broaden your perspective.
Great. So Brad, should we begin?
Let's go for it.
So Brad, let's jump right in. What is a product?
Well, the simplest way to describe what a product is it's something that is designed for a specific type of user to solve their specific needs. And basically, on one end, you have the users. They have needs that they want to accomplish. Your product, presumably and hopefully, can help them solve that pain point or accomplish that goal better than other solutions. Often we discuss it in terms of unmet needs. And on the other end, you have the business, and that product needs to be profitable in a way that keeps the business running, progressing. Basically, it's anything that solves users' needs and provides value to the company. And one good way to think about it broadly is in three categories. Normally, when we talk about product management, the default discussion is related to digital products, software, apps, media, that type of thing. But physical products are just as important. Apps don't do anything unless the iPhone is sitting in your hand, for example, right? And then the often forgotten or overlooked element to product management is services. And this is a huge one in so many contexts. And one way to think about these categories is thinking about a company or a platform of products or an ecosystem that takes advantage of all of them. If you think about Uber, for example, you have the digital element, you have the app, you have the data collection, you have all these things that go into really the engine behind Uber, but it doesn't exist unless you have the physical. So the physical on Uber could be the actual food that Uber Eats delivers, or it could be the mechanics that drive the vehicle autonomously. And then the service is, does the driver show up? Do you get to where you want to be? So it's a great example of having all of these elements and why each of these features, each of these elements, each of these different domains and jobs to be done have product managers behind them.
Yeah, that's a very interesting way of presenting it, Brad. I think many times, because technology is ubiquitous today in any industry, it's often perceived that products are software products, whereas it can be hardware as well. And services often perceived as people being part of it. And what goes missing there is services can be digital as well. And many times, most of the solution to a particular problem is via tech-enabled services play. There's a lot of companies in healthcare. The core platform gets used to render some healthcare service by a provider or by a support staff. Yeah. I think that becomes crucial, but you're going back to what actually is the problem and how do you solve for that? And it can be a combination of hardware, software, and services.
Right? Yeah, I love the healthcare example because when you think of a doctor, the software delivers the records to the doctor that says this is the patient's condition. It might deliver recommendations or different things like that. But unless the doctor walks into your hospital room and performs the care, that's the service. And unless that care is high quality, then none of the other back-end products matter because that service is so critical.
Yeah, and that's, I think, goes back to the classic understanding of what problem should we solve for and how much of a product should be built and can build for in a sustainable fashion. And that goes back to us constantly thinking about, as product managers, it's a trade-off machine where you're trying to balance out the product need, the problem need, the strategic value, and in a way, sort of taking a bet at the end of the day. And that's why, that's a classic challenge, right? As much as it is science, and you can learn a lot of core elements and aspect of it, it's equally art in the way that you need to have a mindset and have an instinct of converting those user journeys, maps into something really insightful to create something more meaningful.
And even understand the operations. Like another great example of a service is Amazon Prime. Mm-hmm. And I personally, and a lot of us, at least in the US, have become so accustomed to Amazon Prime and the 2-day delivery. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure, we'll pay for it. And we just expect like clockwork that package will be here in 2 days or less, which if you rewind 5 years ago, 6 years ago, the whole idea of Amazon Prime delivering as efficiently and quickly as they do, it was crazy. So the PMs behind it had to look at feasibility. They had to look at the costs of implementation, the quality control, all these things. apart from the digital world. It's digital and it's tangible at the same time.
Yeah, and also figure out the supply chain and logistics and inventory management and really build predictive models to help with the prime shipping and optimize for those margins. And that leads to just the mindset of where you're not only thinking of improving the product, but also breaking down why this product exists in its form today.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a very core element as to how do we dissect it. Interestingly enough, I think that's human tendency, Brad, is like it's very easy to find faults or issues with any product. But I think where we have to go a step further is trying to understand why the product exists and the way it exists today, and break it down in a way where we understand whether technology is solving for a problem directly for the user, indirectly for your user, or enabling services for the user.
Yeah, and specifying your user is equally important too. Most products, especially when they start, are definitely not for everybody. They could be for early adopters or a niche market. In case Amazon Prime is a bad example, it applies to so many use cases, so many different types of people. But the healthcare and other things, like if you're dealing with nursing home patients, it's a very different customer base with very different needs than the maternity ward, for example. Like the same product should not be designed, at least initially, for both of those user groups.
That's a great segue. Anyone who is trained in product management or wants to get into product management, I think we have to stop thinking just from the perspective of users and bring this topic of stakeholder. Because there are different stakeholders at different interaction points of using a product or a service. And a customer who pays for a service or a product might be different than the user who is using it. So there are different aspects of different product that might be relevant. And that's where I think having that stakeholder viewpoint is like, hey, I'm user, I'm feeling it. But if I'm on the other side of, let's say, an airport check-in counter where I am an airport staff or airline staff really trying to use it and navigate and solve customer problems, what admin controls would I have? Versus if I am the CFO of an airline, what metrics do I see and how can I aggregate that?
Deb, let's talk about an example that applies to a lot of people.
Sure.
A popular example. Sure. Spotify. Let's talk about their stakeholders.
Their stakeholders. I think one is the users, of course. That's easy. And the second are the artists who upload their audio, video, podcasts, and everything. The third are managers or admins who basically, like in a big music producers have multiple artists, and how do you manage that? And another user is basically who is really understanding and dissecting streams, the revenue piece element. So that's on the top of my head. Those are the four stakeholders that I could think of.
I'll add the advertisers who are really...
Yes. See, I forget.
Yeah, it's we've actually done this in class at one point, is map out the stakeholders for Spotify, and it becomes far more complex than it appears on the surface, because money is exchanging hands and value and interactions from all of these different groups, and it's important for PMs to understand the potential and the complexity of these interactions and these stakeholders, because it's not just the customers and it's not just your CFO, but at the same time, in a broad sense, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to our listeners, Brad and I have a brief outline, but we don't get to discuss it before the episode so that it's a natural interaction. So if you feel like I can improve my product management skills, I'll tell you, you're not alone. I'm there with you. So
there's no such thing as a perfect product manager. That's for sure.
No, that's great. I think we can walk a few other examples so that our listeners actually get the essence of what we're trying to say here.
Dave, while we're on this topic, if you have a cool technology and decide to build something, is that enough to call it a product? Is that a good idea?
It depends. If you can marry multiple pieces together and you're solving a critical problem, and you can do it in a viable, scalable manner, and you're getting positive inclinations by building it incrementally, then absolutely go for it. But I faced a lot of challenges, Brad, saying no to a lot of different projects when I see great research, but coming out of that research, I cannot convince myself that there are enough pieces that stitch together to make it into a successful business.
Deb, this is a surprise to you, but we've discussed this previously in different contexts.
Mm-hmm.
This is my toothbrush. It has Bluetooth, if you can see the lights.
Yep.
I will never use that feature. I can't imagine holding my phone in one hand and my toothbrush in another. I can't imagine even grabbing my phone when I go to brush my teeth. And the funny part about this is it's not just me. If you look at the Amazon reviews for this thing, as far as I can tell, delivers no value to anybody in a practical sense. Maybe it provides marketing value because someone that doesn't think it through will pick up the package that says Bluetooth. But the reality of the situation is I got this on a huge sale. I'm presuming because nobody cares about the feature. They just want the brush. It's a good machine for what it is, but I consider it a totally physical product. Most users, at least based on the reviews, share my opinion.
I think commodities like toothbrush, it's so difficult to create a value add to keep on selling the same commodity again and again. So there's always a challenge to come with some innovative solution. So to your point, while it might not be relevant maybe for a majority of the users, maybe it adds some value in like kids or teenagers or people with cavities like me, like really understanding my brushing pattern. Maybe I'll use it, but it's very teeny tiny. And should we solve for, is that a good number of users to solve for that product? Maybe no. But when you think of adding the marketing advantage and how it might be much more attractive toothbrush in an aisle of very identical toothbrushes, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, you're thinking about how do we improve margins on a product that has been commoditized.
Yeah.
If you think from that perspective, I think it adds tremendous value. But as a user, it does not.
What about your daily communications in life? Now, I'm not a WhatsApp user, and I'm starting to realize that's because I'm American and like the rest of the world. But
I completely agree. Couldn't agree more. Like most of my conversation, especially in the US, within the US, is very much limited within the iMessage or texting. But broadly, whoever is not on the iOS ecosystem or globally as well, WhatsApp is the means for not only doing interactions, but also business communications.
So how would you describe their positioning or their value proposition?
The core value proposition is make end-to-end communication from one person to another as simple as possible. You don't have to sign up 100 different things. You don't have to give all of your information. You just give your phone number and you're connected digitally via the internet. Right? And it's encrypted and it's global and you can share as many files as you want. And it's just seamless. And now they have WhatsApp payments. They have WhatsApp for businesses. I was really amazed back in India when I booked a flight ticket. I actually got my boarding passes and everything on WhatsApp. Then going to a website, clicking on it and downloading a PDF. It's in WhatsApp.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. And it's on WhatsApp. So and also all of my communications, my mom's communication with her bank is all via WhatsApp. Even with the relationship manager, you don't need to call. You just send a text and they'll get back to you with something that's important.
And that's a good example going back to my Whoop, where they started with a core competency in solving a core problem and found ways to expand to integrate into other aspects of those users' lives and solve additional problems, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, it's a widely used product, and I cannot imagine the scale at which Meta would be operating WhatsApp and the amount of data that they curate. And how do they anonymize that data and the kind of predictive algorithms that they can create based on demographic? That would be so much beneficial for any businesses to utilize that as a communication platform.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Any other examples? I think we know with the consumer-facing applications are very easy to understand. But the biggest challenge is when we try to understand and unpack maybe a B2B business or a healthcare.
Yeah, B2B, especially by aspiring PMs, is
Yeah.
overlooked or undervalued significantly. Most people, when they say, I want to be a product manager, it's, I want to be a product manager at Google. I want to be a product manager at Netflix. But in reality, there's so many opportunities for B2B, even for products that you as a user might not even enjoy. That doesn't mean they're not profitable and successful and do a job for somebody, maybe somebody else. My poster child for this example is Workday, where anybody, and probably a lot of our viewers, are applying to jobs or have recently applied to jobs or are getting ready to apply to jobs. And as an applicant, Workday is just an absolute nightmare. But let's talk about why it exists.
Yeah, what problem is it solving for? I think that's crucial.
Yeah.
I have been at the tail end of it where it's like it doesn't even post my resume correctly. And I understand, like on the inside of it, if I'm working at Workday, it's so difficult to understand the templates and resume templates unless there's a standardized format for doing everything.
Yes.
But at the same time, is it really built for the applicants?
It's built for HR, sadly. And what does HR really care about at the end of the day? It's regulatory compliance. It's documentation. It is having a record system that prevents them from getting sued. All these things that us as the applicant or as the person on the front end using it don't care about. But for the HR professionals, it sorts documents so that they can recall them, so that they are compliant with government laws. And the reason that an applicant might hate it so much, but an HR person uses it every day, is because who's paying?
Yep.
Who's buying Workday? And that tells you exactly who it's designed for.
Couldn't agree more, Brad. You can see it categorized and annotated, and they become really smart. And then, it can help you understand. You can have ATS screeners. It can tell you some high-level insights, and then it makes it easier for you to screen candidates. But at the same time, we understand that the consumer interaction on the other side is a constant improvement, but that improvement does not necessarily increase tremendous value for the product. Yes, they have to keep at pace. They have to improve. And that's where, if I'm a product manager at, let's say, Workday or Oracle, or think of any HRM system, I'm trying to optimize for my paying customers, making sure that my end users are also getting a positive experience, because they do not want to derail the value they're creating for the primary paying customer. That is the enterprises, the companies, the offices, the businesses.
Yeah.
But also, like, okay, you come here, you have to make it easy so you get more applications. That should not be a hindrance that because of using an HRM system, you're only getting 10 instead of 100.
Yeah. And then there's even an argument to say that even for the back-end users, the usability is difficult, but that leads to revenue streams for support and maintenance and training. And you could almost say there's a disincentive for it to be usable.
Yeah, absolutely. Brad, could we switch gears and talk about maybe any hardware examples that may have a digital component as well?
Yeah, well, I'll talk about one. I'll choose one that is hardware, or at least appears to be hardware, but it's actually sneaky in the sense that it's multiple things. Peloton bicycles, right? Most people are aware of what they are. It's an exercise bike, a stationary bike, and when you think of people say, I have a Peloton or I use a Peloton, they're generally referring to the hardware, right? The machine that they purchased. Now, Deb, I did a little research on this example. Where do you think Peloton's profit comes from?
Their consumer app?
The
subscription service?
Yeah. The I think it's 70% of their revenue is from the subscription, not from the bicycle itself, which is like they generate plenty of revenue from the bicycles, especially during COVID. But really their sustained revenue and their present day revenue, their profit or ability to profit, is based on the subscription.
Yeah. No.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's where when I evaluate companies as well, especially with Peloton, it's a one-time fixed revenue that you get, but it's also a big barrier to entry. So how do you make sure that you reduce that barrier of entry, give a quality physical product, create that impression of a high quality brand, and then make you like to the consumer act on a subscription service that does not put a dent on your pocket, but creates significant margins from the business standpoint.
Yeah.
And the biggest margins we know exist in software or selling software products, right?
Yeah, and Peloton, similar to maybe CrossFit or these other things, they've done a great job of my hobby has become my identity, and that creates loyalty among.
I mean, that's the core of why Amazon Prime, Apple ecosystem, even Google ecosystem, Android ecosystem is so successful.
Yes.
And on the business side or the engineering side, it's the GitHub, the GitLab, Microsoft products, or maybe Atlassian products where it just shot up. And on the designer side, I think it's also like Adobe Creative Cloud to Figma, and how do you design those elements and narrate.
Yeah, Figma's a good one.
Yep. Completely taking a side step. What I was thinking is on the hardware is also maybe IKEA.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll just add just a quick caveat to that. IKEA is also an experience because of the novelty of the store. But yeah, the idea that there's a user group who needs moderate quality, low cost furniture, and they've found a market that has not been dominated by anybody else. Furniture that even if it includes the cost of me building it and assembling it, that is durable enough to be presentable, but also I can afford it for my dorm room. It's no mystery why they're so successful.
Yeah, it's like you're not shipping fully made furniture to your home, shipping it in packets, so you can optimize for supply chain. So it's great for business. It improves your margins. But at the end of it, Brad, there's also a behavioral element, a consumer behavioral element, where when someone builds something by their own hands, they tend to like it more.
Yes.
They tend to be more loyal. They tend to use it more. And there's a sense of satisfaction that you keep on coming back. And it doesn't cost you much. So you're, in a way, like, it's a win-win and satisfying situation.
Yeah. The struggle to make it complete is part of the experience as well.
Yeah. Can we think of something completely separate? I think we touched base, we wanted to talk about this, but I think entertainment and media is often overlooked as we think of products, right? And to begin with, I think we can think of the likes of Netflix and streaming services, like let it be Netflix or HBO Max or Disney Plus and all of that. But also maybe thinking of sport leagues like NBA, or for listeners globally or in India, it's IPL, Indian Premier League, or Wimbledon. These are all packaged consumer products. Yes, the core element of it, and especially in sport league, is definitely the sports. But how do you package it, bundle it, create a business out of it to attract more users to watch it, but also attract more people to sponsor and brand it?
Yeah, and what are the jobs to be done of a sports league or a sports franchise? I just recently saw a post from for anybody who's not from Pittsburgh or unfamiliar with Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Pirates are annually a pretty bad baseball team. They're expected. I
didn't say that. So everyone who's listening from Pittsburgh, I didn't say that. Brad said that.
They're expected to lose. They've lost almost every year for most of my lifetime, except in the early 90s. But it was interesting. I saw a post, a Pirates fan posted something about, oh no, my life is hell again this year. How does sports leagues, sports teams gain so much loyalty from viewers that it actually affects your happiness in life when your team isn't good? That's always puzzled me. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's where your point of the jobs that need to be done. Now, if I am thinking of of a sports league as a business and a sports team as a business, I have different priorities. On the core of it is, how do we create a much more sticky fan base? How do I create much more great sponsors so that I can actually reinvest it in a business and create value? And it's basically a cyclic effect.
And if I can add, sports teams and franchises are an excellent example that have all the product types that we mentioned. There's digital, there's hardware. So the digital might be the ticketing app, or the digital might be the media clips that the teams release, or the broadcast itself. The hardware is the jerseys, the memorabilia, the different things that they can generate revenue from as a result, as almost a byproduct of the team's existence. And then the service is the entertainment during the game, the interviews. And in the end, for most people, the job to be done is entertainment. For other people, it goes a little deeper than that, but those are your super fans. But it's one business, one organization that leverages all of these products in sync with each other.
Couldn't agree more. And that's a great segue, Brad, to the other thing that I wanted to discuss for our listeners. We often are very confused, at least I was, is what's the difference between product, platform, and ecosystem? It can be very overwhelming when few people talk about it as a platform versus product versus the whole ecosystem.
And I think it's equally important to talk about what does that mean to the product manager as well. Like, for younger or for aspiring product managers, you're generally going to be working on features related to a product, new features, improving existing features, and understanding the value, understanding the requirements to make it feasible and build it. For the most part, that's where a PM, especially an early career PM, will exist. In some ways, the product is a collection of features depending on its maturity. And then beyond that, that's when understanding the structure more broadly becomes important, so that you understand that platforms exist upon which multiple products can exist, right? And then tell me about ecosystems, Deb.
Yeah, an ecosystem, the way I think about it is, the classic example is Apple in the sense, or Microsoft, if you're thinking on the enterprise side versus consumer side. From Apple, it began with an iPhone, to the services that relate back to a Mac, to an iPad, to all the other services that you rely on. I can take a call on FaceTime on any device, and it carries on. And I think that seamless integration creates sort of a dependency. If you actually have to change one thing in the puzzle or in the journey, you actually have to change the whole ecosystem. And that's a lot of reason. That's a good reason why a lot of people have a lot of stickiness. And it's not only with Apple, it's the same thing with Google as well. It's the same thing with Microsoft. It's the same thing with Prime and Amazon. It's the same thing with Walmart. And you see patterns like this many times, is how do you create combined platforms and products together to solve a very big and broad problem for either an individual user or a particular kind of stakeholder in their day-to-day living. Not everybody uses all hardware devices from Apple or all of their applications.
Yeah, it's designed with intent as well.
Yeah, so that everything stitches together.
Yep.
I also think of gaming being another situation. Stock trading, apps, maybe a different example. Gaming is a good example because it's a product and a platform at the same time. Also, it becomes really complicated as you think through it. Maybe that would be an exercise for our listeners to think through how gaming, especially digital gaming, can be played at professional levels, at league levels, and how there is a whole ecosystem and a business around streaming gamers. If you see the whole chain and try to unpack it, you're solving multiple problems, you're doing several jobs. At the end of it, every piece of the puzzle generates revenue, and every piece of a puzzle needs to be solved in a certain way. And obviously, there are efficiencies that could be improved.
Yeah. And it's now that almost all games are online, at least in some way, it's very different from when I grew up putting a cartridge into the Nintendo, and that was the whole experience, was me playing a game in isolation, but it's so much bigger now.
Yeah. So Brad, what are the key takeaways? from our discussion today?
Well, I'll start by saying products are everywhere, and that consciousness of understanding
Mm-hmm.
what I'm using, why it was built the way it was,
Mm-hmm.
what are the opportunities for improvement. If I were the PM, I would do this or that based on what I know. Now, presumably, the actual PMs have more information than you, so hopefully they're making good decisions, but they're everywhere, and understanding your own interaction with products
Mm-hmm.
helps one to think like a product manager, and it creates consciousness for your life and the life of your future users. When you think of these things, think of them broadly. Think of any element that creates value for me that I'm using and also creates value for the business, and understand how the business is making money at the end of the day with this product, because as a PM, that cannot be overlooked. Some people think too far in one direction, and also if you're working on a newer product or you're working on a feature from an existing product, which you likely will be doing at a larger company, your initial target, at least, is not to build it for everybody. It's to build it for specific people with a specific need. Like we used the example of the nursing home and the maternity ward have very different operational models and very different services to deliver to very different types of people. And you wouldn't build the same product for all patients necessarily.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think the thing that I want to share from my personal journey as a product manager as well is I have often struggled, Brad. The biggest challenge is how do you have razor sharp focus on building one particular thing with a strategic viewpoint of winning at a large scale? But you have to start small, validate, and pivot, but having that line of sight. And the other part, which I think in my early career, which I completely missed, is I saw the world in a particular silo, saying that if I understood the user journey, if I mapped it out correctly, it makes the whole sense, and that's the only thing needed to do.
Yeah.
But the other part of it is you have to get the users to use it. You have to make margins on the business for it to exist. Yes, the core of it is having a product that solves a problem. But the sooner we start thinking strategically, the sooner we start thinking of all the other elements, in the sense that, okay, if there's an issue with the product, if my consumers want to reach back to me, how do they do that? If I have to enable my salespeople to go out there and sell it, what they should be talking about.
Yeah. So, Dave, maybe to punctuate this,
Mm-hmm.
we want to make this experience, this podcast, as interactive as possible. And taking these takeaways leads us to what is my favorite sort of coaching point with PMs that are struggling or maybe losing their direction or feel like they don't have a grasp on what to do next or what the real purpose is. And it's called a point of view statement, POV statement. And very simply, the idea is take a look at your product. Even if you're not a PM right now, think about the product that you're working on. Or if you're not in a company where you're working on a product, think about something that's in your hand or something you're using. And the way to boil down and kind of self-assess is called a point of view statement. And I'm inviting our viewers to do this as an assignment. Fill in the blanks in this statement. Is blank needs blank because blank. And the first blank is the user. The second blank is the unmet need. The third blank is the goal that the user wants to accomplish. So you're going to be specific in isolating and identifying who your user or who your intended user is. You're going to contemplate based on research, based on understanding their journey, based on what you know about this user. You're going to understand what need they have, what pain point that is not currently being solved. And then the user goal is, it's basically the why. It's why are they trying to accomplish this? And you can apply this to something as abstract as a master's degree, but also something as concrete as this toothbrush or anything else.
Sometimes it needs to be as simple as that, and then you can work on top of that. But with that, Brad, I think it's a good time to wrap our episode today. Like, subscribe, and comment. You can comment on any channels. We are on YouTube. We'll be on podcast mediums, starting from Spotify or anywhere you listen your podcasts. You can reach out to any of our social media handles. All of them are mentioned in the description below. But besides that, you can also reach us directly at theprodctsignal@gmail.com. And for our listeners, the next episode is the one that really excites me. It's something that I have struggled with, that I still see a lot of people struggle with, and I think it's truly fundamental.
I'll add, Deb, you won't pass an interview without it.
But we'll talk about that story in our next episode. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. With that, it's a wrap.